So today I want to talk about violence. Not that scary though. It's state violence. So it's got flowers. It's really pretty. State violence has existed forever, basically, as long as states have existed, and it's become completely normalized. People have justified it in almost all circumstances, almost universally, aside from criticizing other countries. And state violence doesn't mean going into foreign nations or war, killing Nazis, but instead, violence is against the citizens that make up the state. State violence is defined as acts of violence committed by an official state, military, or sponsored by a sovereign government outside of the context of declared war, which target civilians or show a disregard for civilian life in attacking targets, either people or facilities. So, how did these justifications for state violence get the way they are now, and how did they get so far out of hand? Well, this roots back to the earliest talks about justice and the social contract. American society is a social contract, so I think it's best to talk about this in that forms, especially in the way that John Locke describes it, where he explains it as being all equal and independent. No one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. And John Locke believed that the government was made to protect these rights, and people entered the social contract to have them protected. The government exists to protect these rights, and as we form a system, we need to have a way to enforce these rules and create a system of justice. For without the system, we would live in a state of nature, and as John Locke describes it, the state of nature is a state of war, which is really scary. Lots of violence there, not the good kind, not the state violence. He describes the state of war as a state of enmity and destruction. Truly horrific stuff. Wouldn't want that happening. And we get to see how the fear of the state of war has caused some extreme use of violence and an unwillingness for people to seek reform. So the first thing I want to go over is justice and what that means for us in the United States. One of the most influential philosophers of the modern era is John Rawls, and he discussed and offered us answers for the definition of justice, and he describes it as justice as fairness. He states each person has the same indefensible. How do you even say this word? Jesus Christ.
Indefeasible.
He states each person has the same indefeasible claim to a fully adequate scheme of equal basic liberties, which scheme is compatible with the same scheme of liberties for all. That we must not only have basic freedoms, but that they must be equally applied to each member of the society. And though his work has had great influence on American society, we can't seem to break out of this idea of justice as retribution. That those who have done wrong should be punished by the state. And though I have a lot to talk about the injustice of our justice system, it seems a lot of people don't even get there and have punishment straight applied to them from the police without due process. I don't think I need to show any of the footage of the insane amounts of police brutality that we've seen now or in the past. I'm sure many of you have seen it on your feeds as of lately. Seeing justice as a scale that needs to be balanced is a pretty common interpretation of what justice is, but it seems people are willing to give people the authority to do any amount of harm to someone, no matter what crime they've committed, as long as they've committed a crime. Or in some cases, when they haven't, as long as the police are the ones distributing the violence, they are the arbiters of justice. And us Americans have no limit to our thirst for retribution. There have been many arguments coming up justifying police brutality. These arguments are based on the fact that the person was committing a crime or even had committed crimes in the past, decades in the past even. And this idea seems wholly un-American and unjust. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the Candace Owens videos that went viral with her bad take. And this isn't a new take. It happens and comes up in almost every instance of police brutality and police negligence. But people are completely okay with these arguments, and this brings me back to the social contract. People are scared of changes and accountability because it could lead to more crime, as many argue, and degradation into the state of nature, which is a state of war, which would lead to more violence. And as long as the government is not attacking their liberties and just attacking others using state violence, they're okay with it. The status quo stays the same. And this is very purposeful arguments. Police regularly use threats of striking and letting criminals take over the streets as a response to reform. And not just police, judges, politicians will run on law and order and being tough on crime, invoking this fear of society in shambles. Recently, even President Trump was invoking this strategy.
I am your president of law and order.
So this brings me to the protests and the protesters. Across the entire country in all 50 states, people are protesting the death of George Floyd and police brutality. These protests have been met with excessive police force and police brutality, and people are justifying it because some are breaking the law. But I think it's important to realize that's kind of the point. Protests are a form of civil disobedience. As Rawls comments on civil disobedience, it defines this kind of dissent and separates it from other forms of opposition to democratic authority. These range from legal demonstrations and infractions of law designed to raise test cases before the courts to militant action and organized resistance. And these test cases are exactly what we've gotten. It's been painfully clear that police are willing to dish out extreme punishment for small infractions, even going so far as to attack and arrest members of the press. So we've established the need of civil disobedience in order to force change for the oppressed. So why is this such a weak argument to so many Americans? Well, retribution is still in the heart and soul of so many Americans, and violence needs to be met with violence. A popular argument I've seen for justifying the aggressive police force that we've seen is that it's necessary to stop looters and terrorists. We'll get back to that one. I don't think anyone would disagree the police responding appropriately to looters or anything like that would be a bad thing, but they clearly have not. They have engaged in far more extreme acts than could ever be justified. And the police attacking civilians is state violence. And state violence has been normalized. It shouldn't be. State violence should be under the most scrutiny of anything that happens in a society because it has no higher power to oversee the abuses. Even police force that is justifiable should be scrutinized. And I can't say it's just gotten this bad. People have been sounding the alarm on police brutality for decades and years. But the stale Cheeto-in-Chief has made it worse. It should be absolutely terrifying to people that the president not only welcomes excessive force, but invites it and encourages it. And rhetoric like that is the kind of thing that normalizes state violence on citizens. Even going so far as to label random protesters terrorists. Like, what the f***? He even called the old man that was pushed over and had a brain injury a secret member of Antifa. Oh my god, he's so dumb. I think it's important to state that state violence is necessary in a social contract kind of setting. People who break the social contract need some form of consequence for breaking the social contract, or else the whole idea is kind of useless. Obviously, a police force is necessary, but police force of any kind, just or unjust, is state violence. And excessive force, especially towards those in the Black community, is a systemic injustice that needs to be solved. And when we don't condemn and make active effort to fix these injustices in our society, we can't live in a just society. I also, just a quick note I wanted to say, the social contract isn't the only way to view a moral society. I'm not necessarily tied to the idea, but I think it's a great way to illustrate injustices in the American society that's necessarily tied to a social contract kind of idea. To those of you out there protesting, thank you for making history and forcing change to our broken system. I hope that the ideas that I talked about in this video can help change the idea of state violence into what it actually is and help people recognize that so it can get the proper scrutiny it deserves. To those of you who can't be out there protesting, please do anything you can. Sign a petition that you believe in, make a donation to an organization that helps the cause, and please vote, especially in your local elections. Those ones have the most impact on police reform and helping your local community. One more thing you guys all need to be doing is holding your friends and family accountable to any type of bad ideas that they have. Help educate them on these topics. Black Lives Matter. Thank you guys for watching. Peace.